Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of Rhyme and Reason, its ongoing mission to talk about movies and TV and other stuff that you probably don't know you cared about, but you probably should. So it's pretty simple. Hit the music. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the best show on Take 3 that you aren't watching. Because we can see the views, and they're lower than a lot of the other videos, so you should really start watching this show. But we don't care about that. Because me and Sanji just get on Skype and we just hit record, and that's how this show kind of came to be. So we don't care. But guys, today, we're here. You've heard us talk about Star Wars a lot. Like, our whole first episode was supposed to be about favorite films, and it turned out talking about Star Wars. You see the posters behind me. You see the schmoes style shirt I'm wearing. I know what you're thinking, because you definitely didn't read the title of this video when you clicked on it. We're not talking about Star Wars. We're talking about the other one. We're talking about Battlestar Galactica, 1978. No, Battlestar Galactica is awesome, though. And I'm sorry, I'll gladly say, 78, 2000s. I'm taking the 78 one. I don't care how goofy it is. But no, we're talking about Live Long and Prosper. We're talking about Star Trek today. Me and Sandy are huge Trekkies, Trekkers. I call myself a Trekkie. That's just me. I call myself a Trekkie. So guys, today, this is I think I'm just going to title this episode Star Trek, like Bonanza, Palooza, something. We're going crazy here. We are doing top 5 lists of pretty much everything. We're doing top 5 TNG episodes, top 5 TOS episodes, top 5 characters overall in Star Trek, and then top 10 Star Trek movies. Sandy, how excited are you to do this?
Oh, Maddie, I am so excited for this. Star Trek has been a passion of mine for as long as I can remember. Star Wars was always, you go to the movies and it was always great. But Star Trek was on TV. When I was a kid, I was watching the original series in reruns all the time. And then, I was a teenager when Next Gen came out, and I fell in love with it. And talking about it with another Star Trek fan, somebody that knows it as well as I do, this is going to be a pleasure. But I'm telling you this right now, the Star Trek Next Generation episode breakdown, holy crap, there's so many good episodes I couldn't put in there, but I'm just like, you know what, that's the fun of what we're doing here. So I'm really excited, man.
I'm with you. When I was doing my top 5, I was like, there's one I want to put in, but I'll take it out. I'm like, I really hope Sanji has this on his list so we can still talk about it. Like, it was, yeah. So I told Sandy my Star Trek story, but I'll tell here for all of you. When I was a kid, I got my first TV, big box TV. This was back in early 2000s, like 06, 07 maybe. And there was no cable box with it. There was just the little cable wire. Because, again, I'm 21, and technology has still, just in the last few years, just expanded. And I didn't even have a remote controller. And there was no channel guide. There was I remember there was the channel guide channel where you would sit there and to see the channel, you wanted to know what was going to be on Nick that night. You had to wait for it to scroll through channel 33 and then see what's going to be on.
Oh, those were the days,
yeah,
man.
those were the days. And so what I did a lot as a kid was I channel surfed, which is you just flip around until you find something. This one night, TV Land had just gained the syndication rights to the original series. and they were doing they were showing every episode of Star Trek, and was leading up to Wrath of Khan, the network premiere of Wrath of Khan. And
Nice.
I just, right time, I click on, and Trouble with Tribbles is on right at the very beginning. I'm like, ooh, this is an interesting, like, space, like, if what is this? And then the opening happens, and I was locked. I did not leave the TV, and I was just, I, the episode finished, and I ran downstairs with my mom, and I told her about this Star Trek thing, and and I watched every episode that I could as a kid, and then at the end of the week saw Wrath of Khan for the first time, which was just, and the thing was this was post Revenge of the Sith, and it was right before Clone Wars was even a thing. So Star Wars was done. There was no new Star Wars coming out. Star Trek, yeah, it was old. It was like old at that point, but like for me, everything was new. Every
Yep.
episode of Star Trek I saw was new, and that was, for me, it became my new obsession of 5th grade, because it was like everything's new. Oh my god! Like, and my mom, again, drum and age, we didn't have DVR, we had VHS recorders, because Star Trek, sadly, it was at night. They would show from 11 to they would show like an episode at like 11 o'clock at night, and my mom would record it for me, and I would get up the next morning, put in the VHS tape, and watch the episode from last night. That's what I would do as a kid. Yeah, and then BBC America was the channel with Next Generation, and I saw that for the first time, and that show, it was like, again, it was in the same way as it was like, and I saw TNG at the right time, where the original series had just set into me, like, doing the, like, waking up and watching the recorded episode from last night had set in, that I was like, oh my god, there's more? There's even more Star Trek? Like, this is fantastic! And, yeah, so that's my Star Trek story, and I am so excited to talk about this. So, Sandy, which top 5 list I'll let you decide. Which top 5 list do you want to start with? Because we're gonna save the movies for the last. I think
Last,
that
yeah.
is the
Uh, well, you know what? Let's start in chronological order. Let's go with the original series episodes.
All right. So, guys, if you know how top 5 lists work, I think a fun way to do this is do it the same way we did sports movies, which is we do Sandy, you do your 5 to 3, I do my 5 to 3, you do your number 2, I do my number 2, we do our number 1s. All right, so you want to get started off with your 5 to 3?
Absolutely. Okay, so my number 5, in all honesty, number 5 is the very first Star Trek episode, because when I was watching in reruns, this was the first one that came on there, and I was fascinated by it right from the start. It's a great episode that really showed how close the crew was together, because they literally would do whatever it takes to help this one person. And that is the episode called Spock's Brain. When Spock's brain got kidnapped, they had to go and find it, and they had to make sure it was like a timed episode. They only had a certain amount of time before Spock's brain would be separated forever, and he had to, like Leonard Nimoy was awesome in that, because he couldn't do anything. He was just walking around with them with this little beanie thing on his head, and and Kirk and the rest of the Enterprise are scrambling all over the place, doing whatever they can to try to get it back. So for me, that was my number 5. Once again, super hard to pick the best episodes, but okay, so that's my number 5.
Great episode.
Yeah, it's so good. My number 4, if the 3 that I had in front of it weren't so awesome, this would probably be my number 1, because I'm such an absolute maniac for alternate realities and parallels and stuff like that. So my number 4 is Mirror. It's the first time we saw the alternate universe.
Captain Kirk!
And I'll say this about that episode. William Shatner is absolutely on the top of his game in that one. He is so over the top, but good over the top, playing the evil Captain Kirk. And if you ever read any of the books with the Mirror Universe, if you ever saw any of the other episodes on any of the others, like the humans were bad people, and they weren't the fun loving crew or
Mirror
federation that we have
Universe
now.
Kirk was not
Bad.
flying around the universe,
No,
hooking up
bad,
with
bad, bad.
alien babes. He was
No.
probably killing them.
He was. He was definitely. And there was actually a couple of books that came out in the Next Generation series that really touched on the Mirror Universe a lot more
I
and
think the
played
new comic book series is all set in the Mirror Universe. I haven't gotten to
exactly.
read it yet, but yeah.
It's such a deep thing that you can get yourself into. But that's though Spock's Brain and Mirror are my number 5 and number 4 episodes because they're just fantastic.
Yeah. All right.
Your number 5 and 4.
All right, my number 5 episode is The Trouble with Tribbles. This is one of the fun episodes of Star Trek. This episode is
Fun.
Not a lot happens that's life-changing. Like pretty much, if you've never seen the episode, yes, this is the episode where Kirk opens the hatch and all the little furry things fall on him. It's the thing everyone knows, but the episode is so much fun, and it's also one of those problem-solving episodes that I love about Star Trek, which I think the original Next Generation has more of them, and that's why the original series didn't get the credit that they did have these episodes where it was like, there wasn't action, it was really just like, okay, how do we solve this issue that there are these animals that are just continually multiplying, they're going to take over our ship. And they have to figure out how to do it, and it's fun. And it's a little silly, like Star Trek, but I really love the Spock and Kirk and McCoy dynamic of how do we get rid of this? And also, it's on here too because if I never saw this episode, I might not be here talking about Star Trek because this was the thing that pulled me into Star Trek.
Yeah, it's such a great episode. It's so much fun. The Klingons are one of my absolute favorite characters in all of Star Trek.
They're my favorite villain race in Star Trek in the original series.
And to have I just love the scene with in the bar, and the Klingon captain is like, and he's just dissing Captain Kirk, and then he crushes on
Captain Kirk.
That's right. And Scotty's sitting there and he's like, easy lad, easy, don't get no. And he's like, and the minute they say something about that they call the Enterprise a garbage scour, it should be pulled away as garbage. Scotty's just like, you want to take that back? And he's like, no, whack. And then that whole lineup with Kirk sitting there going, all right, who started it? And they're all like, It's so fun. It's such a fun episode. And yeah, I mean, I can close my eyes legit and see Captain Kirk sitting underneath that food grain and opening the door and all the tribbles, and then he's just sitting there trying to talk, and then one more clogs him in the head. It's such a great episode. I totally agree with you. It's actually my number 2. So
okay. Oh, you should have punted.
I did. You didn't hear me.
Oh, I didn't. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Sandy. I apologize.
Buddy. We're talking about it now, so that's good.
I'm sorry. I'm an asshole, okay?
No. Not at all. Not at all. I said it's slow.
Okay, so my number 4 episode is from season 3. It's Day of the Dove. This is probably the best action-centric episode in Star Trek. As a guy who loves, Errol Flynn, Robin Hood movies and, all that, classic sword fighting, the fact that they take the phasers away and everyone has to just go, old school fighting, so much fun. There's a lot of great, for the 60s, great, sword choreography. That fight Kirk has with the head Klingon near the end of the episode, so cool. It's also just a really, interesting idea of just, this alien sort of just feeds into the anger of the crew, and, none of them can die, and it's kind of just, having to destroy themselves, and, Scotty, just that moment of just, we should have left them in the transporter. It just gets really, really dark, and then at the end of the episode where it's just, Kirk figures out that it's like the way we're going to beat this is not by fighting, but by joining together. And that scene of him and the Klingon laughing at the,
Yeah.
you think you could destroy us, and he just throws the sword, and then them laughing, and they still just have great funny moments. It's just like, like Kirk puts his hand on the Klingon commander's back, and the Klingon commander just slaps Captain Kirk on the back, and of course, because he's a Klingon, he's stronger, you just get, again, great William Shatner, just like, oh, I can't say anything because we're supposed to be friends for this. Like, it's a great episode.
Yeah.
A lot of fun action in it. It's one that whenever it was on TV, I always got really excited. And when I finally got Netflix and they had Star Trek on there, it was certainly one of the first ones that I watched.
Nice. It's a great episode, Matt. I absolutely agree with you. Okay, so we're going to move on to my number 3.
Yeah, and your number 2.
And my number 2. All right, so my number 3, I mean, you guys are going to sort of see a pattern with my picks. My number 3 is The City on the Edge of Tomorrow.
That's my number 3, City on the Edge of Forever.
Nice, there we go. It involves time travel. I mean, it gives everything that I want. McCoy gets bit, or he gets infected with something that makes him go crazy, and he runs through the Guardian, and the Guardian puts him to the past, where they meet a girl, and Spock and Kirk follow McCoy to try to get him back. It is not only is it out of space, you know what I mean? Like, they're not on the Enterprise, they're not floating through space. It's not another planet somewhere. It's Earth in the past, and how they interact with everybody, plus what happens. And I'm not going to spoil anything because we already know that there's
this episode. But
yeah, exactly.
So good.
But there's something so tragic that happens at the end of this episode, but had to happen because
it's one of Kirk's finest episodes because of what he deals with. The romance he has with her is so genuine and so believable, and you get this sense of there's a passage of time that they've been there for a while, and it's just, I think Spock is great in this episode. You really see the beginnings in this episode of one of the great movies, which I could talk about the connections between this episode and one of the movies that we'll talk about for actually 2 of the similar reasons, but it's just like, it's so good. And that ending, there's a reason why, guys. Yeah, the episode is from the 60s. It's over 50 years old, but there's a reason why we're not going to spoil it for you guys. Yeah. Listen, if you have Netflix, Star Trek is on Netflix. Go find this episode and watch it, and when you get to that ending, you'll be happy that we didn't ruin it for you, because I didn't have it ruined for you the first time I saw it, and I got to experience it. It is so... Yeah, I mean, these are the episodes that Gene Roddenberry was just such a genius with making, of just, like, interesting commentaries on just, like, this episode is all about fate, and just, like, sometimes things have to happen because the spitball effect, the domino effect is so important that, as tragic and as terrible as an event is, if you do the reverse, something even more tragic can happen, and Kirk having to come to grips with that is so powerful. It's fantastic. And it really does, shine a light on just how dedicated Kirk was to the principles of the Federation and how much he loves the Prime Directive. The Prime Directive. I think this is one of the first episodes where the Prime Directive is sort of discussed. In length, for sure, absolutely. But yeah, absolutely, no. It's a great episode. I'm glad it was both of our number 3s, because it's important, and I think they did a fantastic job with it. All right, so we've already talked about my number 2, but I'm going to actually bring in a little bit of a connection to number 2 that we didn't talk about before, and it's actually my second favorite series in the Star Trek universe, which is Deep Space Nine. And in Deep Space Nine, they had a companion episode called Trials and Tribulations, which was
such a great episode for them because they went back in the exact same time. They
It's a
inserted
good episode.
themselves in all the scenes with all of them. It's so much fun, and it's such a good connective tissue to that episode. And Deep Space Nine was really great for that. They had a lot of mirror episode universe
They had a lot of time
episodes,
travel
a
episodes,
lot of
and they
time
were
travel
all
stuff,
really good.
and all really good. So just the fact that they were able to come up with an idea. I remember watching that episode live and just being like, "Ah, this
Dude,
is
I'm
the
sorry, that
best."
end scene is so
Exactly.
great.
It's so
It's
good.
so good.
Sir, would you this is the duty roster. What's your name? Benjamin Sisko. And it's so good. It's such a great episode.
It's
So
yeah.
you tie that together, and of course you get to see the tribbles dump on Kirk's head again, which is awesome. So yeah, so that's my I
Yeah, I
love the
love
trouble with
seeing
tribbles.
Benjamin Sisko just in that costume. It's so like that man was not built to wear that uniform, and
Oh.
it's so funny. And also I can't imagine if you were like a kid who like Deep Space Nine was your first Star Trek series, and that was your first look at the original series because they really do a good job of making the sets look as barren as possible because there
Yep.
was a shoestring budget to the original. Like I and again as a Star Trek fan, I'm so happy that they did that because it could have been so easy to we're doing a time travel episode to back to the original series. Well, let's do the original series set if they had money. Let's make it
Yeah.
look real. But no, they were like, no, we're going to build the set to look as close to the original as it can, as barren as it may look. And I'm like, as a Star Trek fan, and that was the one thing Deep Space Nine was really good at was continuity. They were
Yeah.
really good with all their time travel stuff. It was real continuity was such an important thing, and that's one of the things I like about that show.
Well, and you hit it perfectly when you were talking about like how they I guess technically dumbed down the effects and the
Mm-hmm.
stuff to create that enterprise and to create all that. And you were saying, what would it look like if we went back into the past with today's technology and stuff like that? It's Star Trek Discovery. So if you've seen Star Trek Discovery, they're actually before the events of Captain Kirk and Spock, just a little bit before,
Mm-hmm.
and the technology is like out of this world. It's all hologram stuff
Makes
all
no
over again. Like,
sense.
I'm like, what?
Damn
This
it.
is not Anyway, I like that series. It's good for what it is, but the simple fact is that Deep Space Nine did it better. And those two episodes are awesome if you watch them back to back.
That's Sandy's short review of Star Trek Discovery. Like they have the promos coming out where it's like the critics are all saying, IGN says 10 out of 10. Great watch. Sandy Robinson, Take 3 says Deep Space Nine did it better.
Yeah. Still good, but Deep Space Nine kicked your ass. It's all right now. All right, what's your number two?
My number
Oh no.
two
Yep.
is your number one. So we're gonna
So we're
punt
talking
it.
about it.
What is
Yep.
your number two?
That Trouble with Tribbles was my number two.
All
So we
right.
talked about that one, so we might as well jump to
Let's
number
talk
one
about
then.
your number one.
All right. My number one is my favorite episode because not only was it kick ass, it had some really good action in it, but it wasn't all about the action. It was the writing, it was the directing, it was the acting, and the introduction of one of the characters that has endured so long in the lexicon of Star Trek that he's pretty much a character forever. And used, and that would be the episode called Space Seed, where we first saw Ricardo Montalban as the villainous, evil genius Khan Noonien Singh. This episode for me is once again, like with Trouble with Tribbles and the Trial and Tribulation episodes, I love watching this episode and then bang right into Wrath of Khan because, of course, in Wrath of Khan we see the return of.
The great thing about the connection between that is the ending, where it's just like, which I guess will spoil the ending in this one because, hey guys, there's a movie based on this character, for God's sakes.
That's right.
Where it's just like at the end when they put them on City Alpha 5 and Spock's just like, what if we were to return to this planet, in the future and see what kind of seed we've planted? And then that's why I love to do that too, because then you see this is the seed that they planted is in Wrath of Khan, and it's a
And
bad seed they
bad
planted.
seed, man. It was bad. And, and it plays so well is that, that Chekhov is the, first officer, of the Reliant that goes down to what they think is SETI Alpha 6. And they end up going down to SETI Alpha 5 and finding Khan. And Khan remembers him. Remembers him. Botany Bay.
Oh, shit.
We got to get out of here.
We need to get out of here now.
Exactly. And then Khan recognized, I know your face.
I never forget the face.
Chekhov, right? And how is my old friend Captain Kirk? Oh, Admiral Kirk. Admiral. And you can just see the psychoticness getting more pissed off.
There's a great spoof that could easily be made of that scene where it's just like, I never forget the face. Chekhov. Well, actually, I was in season 2. I wasn't in season 1. But... Which, by the way, we'll get into the... Because, of course, we'll talk about Wrath of Khan, the movie, a little bit more.
Yeah.
There's a great story with the actor who plays Chekhov where he knew that. He read the script, and he was like, I wasn't in season 1. I wasn't in Space Seed. But he was like, if I say anything, they're going to... write another character who was there into this, and this is such a great scene. Why would I give it to another character? So he just kind of went, yep, I was there. Which, by the way, there's a couple of like books and things where, Star Trek authors that, he was like below the decks. He was like a petty officer or something, which is great.
Absolutely.
Which I love about Star Trek is leave it to the fans to rewrite the mistakes of the movies. But yeah, Space Seed. Such a good episode. We had a lengthy conversation about it the other night, which pretty much led to this episode.
Yeah.
It's such a great Kirk episode. That fight he has with Khan is just like, in a one-on-one boxing match, Khan kills Kirk. But the thing about Kirk is he's smart. Everyone likes to say he's just bronze, but he's like Indiana Jones. He has the brains to back out the bronze, and that's why he's able to defeat Khan. Because he knows how to play them.
And we know, if you're a Star Trek fan and you follow the entire everything, you hear Captain Christopher Pike tell in Star Trek 2009, tell Kirk, you have a genius IQ. What are you doing around here starting bar fights? You should be commanding a starship. And so we know from that. And the fact that you got to go through Starfleet Academy, and with everything we've seen, it's not easy. It's not easy.
It's not easy to do, especially if you're on the command track.
That's
if you're
right.
on like security track, it's fine. But like if you're on the command track, it is not an easy thing to do.
And so we know that Kirk is smart, and that's exactly to your point. Is that straight up, Kirk doesn't beat Khan. Kirk can't beat Spock. But what happens in both of those episodes where they fight? Kirk finds a way, and you can say it's cheating, you can say it's not, but it's survival. Khan wanted to kill Kirk.
I'm sorry, I don't care about cheating when this dude's going to kill me and kill my whole crew and take over my ship. I don't give a shit about playing street rules with this guy.
You pull a pipe out and
knock him. It's But the other thing that's great is, like you said, is like that dinner scene. The conversation Kirk and Khan have is so great, and it's so fascinating.
It's such good back and forth.
I mean, Ricardo Montalban, rest in peace, man. You will forever be one of the I mean, and again, we'll get into this more with Wrath of Khan but top 5 movie villains for me, Khan is on there because he's so good. Like he's so evil.
If I'm gonna go like sci-fi villains, sci-fi fantasy villains, he is right behind Darth Vader for me as villainous. But I mean, that's a totally different conversation.
Yeah, that actually is another great episode we can do is favorite on-screen villains. But we'll move on to my number one, which is Where No Man Has Gone Before.
Nice.
This episode is, I've always said that if aliens came to our planet and were like, for whatever reason, they were like, we need one episode to explain to us what exactly Star Trek is, I would give them this. This was, of course, after the Cage sort of failed to get traction for Star Trek, Gene Roddenberry went back, reworked it, and made a second pilot, which was this. And it's such a fantastic episode for so many things. That opening chess scene between Kirk and Spock is so much fun, and there's that thing of, again, Kirk's smarts. But it's also a great action episode, that fight he has at the end. And again, you see the working mechanism, the fact that, like, he can't beat a god. And it's also, it's a little weird, but Star Trek is a little weird. And it's like, it comes down to Kirk fighting a god pretty much, but it's so cool, and there's so much interesting stuff that Shatner gets to play with, and it's just such an odd episode, but it's the one that it's the one I go back to the most. It's, it's everything that is my love of Star Trek can be traced to how great this episode is.
Absolutely. You're 100% right. It's, this could have easily been on my top 5. It's definitely in my top 10. And it's a great episode because, once again, with the limited amount of time they had, with the, limited amount of budget that they had, they were still able to put something together that was very, it was topical. It was, for the time, it was like, people were angry. This was the 60s. People were upset about stuff, and they wanted to make sure that Gene Roddenberry, as a writer, was so in tune with what was going on in the world. So to put this episode out there to show that this is where the human race has come, and this is what you have to look forward to, is even though you're going to find weird stuff out there, the Federation spirit, the Starfleet spirit is like, you don't give up. You give it everything you have. You fight for what you believe in.
I mean, it's a joke line in Galaxy Quest, which is a fantastic movie, which is never give up, never surrender. But that's like, that's kind of the incarnate thing about Star Trek, and you hit the nail on the head with Gene Roddenberry. Is that was the thing about, especially the original series, was just like, he wanted to make a show that he was able to talk about the issues that were happening in our world, and be like, and recognize that there are issues, and that even in the future these issues still exist. But the fact is, you look at this crew and it's like, that spirit, that human spirit, that even an alien who's not supposed to feel anything can feel, of just like, we'll get through this. We can persevere through this. We can talk this out. I'm sorry, one of the best Star Trek episodes is the hate between the alien races, because one has half his face on one side is white, the other half is black, and the other one has half his face white and the other half is black, and they hate each other. And it's like, you're so similar, but because of that slight difference, you want to kill each other. And that's the beauty of that original series, is just, again, Gene Roddenberry, one of the all-time great storytellers in sci-fi, because he just knew where the culture was, and that they needed something like that. I'm sorry, even in 2018, you can still watch those episodes, and you can laugh at the shoestring budget, and Shatner sometimes is a little over, but like, when you really look at the stories that were being told, and what it was saying about us, it's beautiful.
I agree. It's absolutely, for me, it's absolutely just, it's such foresight is what I'll say. And now that we're going to move over into next generation episodes, once again, it's same thing. I mean, same thing. And some of the ones that, we're going to bring up, the stuff that they talk about is now once again topical.
Well,
and it was 30 years ago.
The thing about Star Trek is the things they talk about are, you were never going to see a Star Trek episode on Nixon. We're never going to see a Star Trek episode on Ronald Reagan or on the Iraq War. What Gene Roddenberry and then Rick Berman talked about were they and again, more Roddenberry than Berman, of course, but what he chose to talk about were just the simple things that it's like, it doesn't matter what country you're in, your people are dealing with this. Racism, segregation, like all these things that are like, they're hopefully they will go out of style, but as of right now, they're not, and that's why we can still watch them so understand. Because you could have an episode that's talking about Ronald Reagan, and
Yeah.
nowadays we'd all look back and we would laugh at that, but it's like we don't laugh at any of the episodes really because the stuff they're talking about is still topical, and
Oh, you're
as
absolutely right.
and that's the wonderful thing about Star Trek.
All right, so let's go into our Star Trek: The Next Generation episodes. This time I'm going to let you go first with your number 5 and your number 4.
All right, so my number 5 is an episode that not a lot of people talk about. It's from season 1. That's why a lot of people. Season 1 of Next Generation. A lot of people don't like. I personally, it's okay, but I went with The Big Goodbye. This is the first holodeck episode in Next Generation. It introduces the holodeck. It is such a as someone who loves like noir, like detective books and movies and stuff like that. It's so much fun to watch this episode, and Picard is that same way. He loves that stuff, and then it's such a fascinating episode. It's also the beginnings of the romance between Beverly Crusher and Jean-Luc Picard is in this episode. Um, it's so much fun, and at the end of the episode, it's such a fascinating thing when Picard's talking to Dickie's partner, and he's just
Yeah.
like, you know what, when you walk out of here, am I still gonna have my wife and my kid at home waiting for me? And it's just like, I don't know. Like, it's such a fascinating. It's not talked about, and I get why because it's season 1, but it is such a great episode for me. It's so much fun.
Absolutely. No, it's a fantastic episode. I love that we had an entire episode of the holodeck, and they did more of them later on and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But you were right. That was the first one. It was we got introduced to the character of Jean-Luc Picard playing Dix, and just it's so much fun for that first 20 minutes, and then it gets serious, but it's still a little bit fun, and you still have to do all that. But
And
just
then
to
at the end of
see
the episode, he uses what he learned in the holodeck to talk to the aliens.
exactly. Yep, absolutely. All right, what's your number 4?
Number 4 might be a punt. I don't know.
Okay.
It is Tapestry.
No, go ahead. Great
Tapestry.
episode.
Man, this is such a great, well-written episode of Star Trek, Next Generation. I mean, one of the best relationships between hero and villain in TV in general is Q and Picard. Because Q just loves to screw with Picard. Like, that's just his thing. It's just fun to watch him mess with Picard and then see how Picard gets away with it. And this episode is so interesting. Again, we talked about with Sitting on the Edge for Forever. We didn't spoil this one, that one. I'll spoil this one a little bit, is just talking about fate and how things are supposed to happen. So what happens is the episode opens after a battle and Picard's been injured. And he has a artificial heart because of an incident that happened to him. And he kind of wakes up in like a purgatory, and Q's there, of course, because of course Q is in purgatory. And he's taught, he tells Q the story of, how a Ferengi stabbed him when he was in the academy. And
A Nausicaan.
Nausicaan. What did I say, Ferengi? Darn. So many Star Trek aliens.
I know.
Nausicaan stabbed him, and that's why he had to get the artificial heart put in. And he's kind of talking about if I could just go back, because that's the thing about the episode is it's possible that because of his artificial heart he's not going to make it, so if he had a real heart he would be fine. And Q says okay, and he sends him back to when he was in the academy. And he does not help his friend, play dungeon, human. He doesn't help him, and I love, and so he doesn't get stabbed, and he wakes up, and he's a, petty science officer. He's just, and no one on the crew knows who he is. No one.
He played everything safe.
He played everything safe from then on, and it's such an interesting episode to talk about that. I mean, the title is Tapestry because if it's like pulling string on a tapestry, you pull one, the entire thing might fall apart. And I love how at the beginning of the episode, when he's watching himself younger and he's laughing when he gets stabbed, he doesn't understand why. And then, of course, when he gets stabbed when he goes back, he knows
Now he knows
why. And it's such an interesting episode, again, talking about fate and how like terrible stuff happens to us, but sometimes we need that stuff to happen to us because it changes us for the better as a person. And this is one of the best episodes of Star Trek to talk about that with.
Absolutely. There was 7 seasons, guys. I mean, there's so many episodes to go through, and Tapestry is one of my favorite episodes because of my love of alternate realities and paradoxes and stuff like that. And, the simple fact is, yeah, he goes back and he does this. He has a relationship with one of his, his schoolmates that he never did before. And now they're no longer friends, and everything, like you said, you pull that one thread on that tapestry and it just unravels your entire life. And then, he goes, he comes, Q, he's just sitting there like this, and Q comes up to me, he's like doing what Q does, tisk, tisk, tisk. Oh. And John Delancey is he's so good as Q. He's so good as Q. And I we could probably go on another whole list with our top 5 favorite Q episodes, because there were so many of them.
So
and
good.
He's so good at that. But Tapestry is absolutely one of my favorites. I love that you picked it. So, but let's go on to your number 4.
That was my number 4.
Oh,
my
was that
number
your number
5
4? Okay.
was The Big Goodbye. So let's go on to your number 5.
Okay, so we're going to go on to mine. Okay, so every list or every number on this list is my favorite ones are the ones that I had an emotional response to. Yeah. So my first one at number 5 is the episode called The Measure of a Man. It was the episode where Data's sentience was put on trial, with Captain Picard defending him and Commander Riker forced to be the opposition, the prosecution counsel, because a scientist at Starfleet wanted to take Data and dissect him so he could make more and put more like Datas on every ship and every janitorial staff. He just wanted to make more mass-produced Data. And Data didn't want to, and they had to have an entire trial based on whether or not Data was a living
if being. He had rights.
If he had
That's
rights.
what it is. If he has rights.
So it's not too, and not to preach or anything like that, but it's kind of not too far about what what we're dealing with now in our like a near future with the creation of AI and people, wanting to build robots and have them be autonomous and all that kind of stuff. What are we going to be like as humans when that happens? Are we just going to create a slave race of people to do our jobs for us so we're okay, or are we going to be compassionate and are we going to let them live their own lives and do that kind of stuff? And that was what this episode was about. And like I said, I'm not going to spoil the ending for you, but I mean, if you watch it,
it's a great. I'm so glad you put it on there. Great episode. It was the first episode I believe Jonathan Frakes directed. Yeah. It's a bottleneck episode. Which, if you don't know what bottleneck episodes are of TV shows, that's where they usually have like 1 or 2 sets only. It's kind of like a cost-cutting thing, and they're mostly using like clips. But this was such a great plot built around that. And
exactly.
It's such a fascinating discussion about, like, does Data have rights?
Yep.
Should we just be able to rip them apart and put them back together? And it's everyone has a great, Jonathan Frakes has a great moment. Patrick Stewart, Brent Spiner is great throughout I'm glad you put it on your list. Great choice.
And I'm so glad that you brought up Jonathan Frakes and Commander Riker's performance in that one, because he didn't want to be the prosecution, but he knew that if he didn't, Data would have been taken away. And so he had to step up and he had to do it to the best of his abilities. But you could see, like we all know that, Picard and Data have a special relationship, but Riker and Data, they had a special relationship too. And it was very hard and very tough for a person to watch a good friend, eviscerate, the defense and just be like, no, and do tricky and nasty things, but trying to save his life in the same time, because he knew if he didn't, it was that. So it was a great Jonathan Frakes episode. Everybody else that you said, Brett Spiner was fantastic in it. Patrick Stewart was great in it. The judge who played the judge was fantastic in it too. An old friend of Picard's that they had a past about too. So it was a great episode. You're right. It was sort of a clips episode too, where they went back and showed all the clips. But they did that from time to time.
I'm sorry, that happens. Listen, Star Trek Next Generation was not a cheap show to produce.
Ooh.
So having a couple bottleneck episodes is to be expected. And it's okay because usually they had great plots built around it.
Absolutely.
So what's your number 4?
All right, so my number 4 was actually really hard to pick. I actually had 2 that I was fighting with, and I decided to just nix one because as much as I'll just say the episode, the one that I nixed would probably be my number 6. Would be my number 6 is the Pegasus. I loved because we'll get to who my favorite Next Gen cast member is too, but it was such a great Riker episode to see what happened in his past, and it was such a good episode. But we'll move on to what my actual number 4 is, and that would be the actual episode itself was okay. It was the last 10 minutes, 15 minutes of that episode that I'll still watch it now and cry. So is Skin of Evil. It's the episode where we say bye-bye to Natasha Yar, the chief of security. I'm going to spoil it because you know what? I can't talk about it.
Yeah, you can't talk about it.
So Tasha Yar, so a shuttlecraft holding Deanna Troi crash lands on a planet, and this planet was a prison, and the prison was holding this creation that this advanced society had created to bottle up all the evil in their world and just put it into one big blob of black goo, and they stranded it on this planet. Well, they unfortunately crash landed on this planet and had to deal with them. Now this thing is so menacing and evil that it doesn't care. It was playing with them for so long, and finally it just it said, you know what, Tasha had enough, rushed the creature and got blasted into into death. But the episode itself is okay. Like I said, it's that last 10-15 minutes where the holodeck and where they go onto the hologram absolutely makes me cry every single time I listen to it. Is hailing frequencies closed, Captain. I lose my ever-loving mind. And then right after, it's like, au revoir, Natasha. And you just it's so emotional.
I wasn't even a big Natasha Yar fan. No fan. She was okay. But yeah, I'm with you that last 10 minutes, man.
It's so emotional. And it was the first time really that you saw a major cast member die in a series. And so when that happens as a kid, even if you're an older, like a young adult, you see that and you're just like, what? No, they're going to bring her back. And I mean, of course, later down on the road, we see that, she does come back a few times, in a different form. But it's for me, why it makes it that tough is because in the face of evil, it didn't matter. Tasha still wanted to do her job as chief of security, and she was, say what you want, but Next Generation was one of the first people to put like a couple of really strong female characters as their main cast.
Get into that with top 5 characters for sure.
Exactly. So number 4 is Skin of Evil for me. Let's go on to your 5 and your 4.
I did my 5 and 4 at first, so I'm going my 3 and 2. It's okay. It's actually very interesting that you did Skin of Evil as your number 4, because my number 3 is Yesterday's Enterprise.
Punt.
All right. My number 2 might be a punt for you as well. My number 1 and 2 easily flipped for me, but at number 2 I have All Good Things.
My number 3.
This episode is so good.
Yeah.
It is. I can't even really it's one of those things where it's like, you have not seen this episode, watch it, but it can't be your first Star Trek The Next Generation episode. You have to, honestly.
There's context.
I'm sorry. No. you have to watch every episode of Next Generation before this. Like,
Yeah.
honestly, you have to, because it is so, like, because again, BBC America, I got lucky. I missed a couple of first season 1 episodes, but I pretty much watched it in chronological order. And when I got to this episode, it hit me in such a good way. It is such a great episode that just talks about relationships and these characters. Like, it, and that's the thing I like is it's, again, and I love how they bookend it, which is it started with Q screwing with the Enterprise crew, and it's ending with Q screwing with the Enterprise crew. And it just, it's so fantastic because every character gets a moment. It's so interesting to see their depiction of the future and the relationships just based on a couple of choices. It's, the things that happen, it's based on a few choices. It's interesting seeing the updated design of the Enterprise D. Yeah, I mean, there's so many funny moments. Data becomes a professor, but because he wants to feel like he's a human, he puts gray streaks in his hair. Because all his friends have grown old, of course, and he can't, and he wants to feel like he did, and it's so fantastic, and it's such a great last hurrah. And I mean, you want to talk about emotional things, one of the top 5 emotional moments for me in a TV show will forever be, you were always welcome.
Yeah.
Just dealing the cards out and pulling back. It's just, it even thinking about it, it hits me still. It is my favorite moment of Next Generation overall.
Yeah.
Is that last scene.
It's such a good episode because it goes to show you just how easily you can forget what's really important in life by the choices that you make. And one choice specifically that we won't spoil for people, but how a friendship can go from being as solid as rock to
being
as
diverted, and
divided.
then what happened because of that, which, let's be honest, that opening thing they chose to do in season 7, it was stupid. I got why they did it, but also I was like, really? But how they dealt with it, I thought was really, really fantastic.
Exactly. And I mean, you're right. I mean, like, once again, another great Q episode, like they go back,
they go back to the pilot. They go back to the
pilot. They go back to, into the future. They go back
before when Picard was first captain of the Enterprise. It's it's a long episode, but it's like, I'm sorry, I agree with some of the producers. It's better than Generations when it comes to movies. Like, it's I was this close to putting this on my top 10 Star Trek movie list, but I was like, okay, fine, it doesn't quite count. But it's probably my top 5. If we're actually being honest, it's in my top 5 Star Trek movies, because it is a movie, and it's
one thing that we'll probably hit on a couple of more times here. Star Trek did a really good job with their 2-part episodes. And made it so it was like a movie, that you're watching, a really good story written from start to finish. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's
this is one of the best examples of that. I don't want to spoil it. Watch a lot of Next Generation. Watch as many episodes as you can, and then watch this one. Don't start with this one. You got to end with this.
Absolutely. Okay, so what's your number? Oh, that was your number 2.
That was my number 2. So what is your number 3 and number 2?
So my number 3 is All Good Things 1 and 2.
Okay,
so,
and then
so then my number 2
is Yesterday's Enterprise,
is Yesterday's Enterprise. Yeah. Once again, it's a paradoxical universe that one event changes, and then We see, nice Enterprise, exploring the universe in their nice lit up, bridge, and everything's all happy and yummy. And then a ship comes right through a wormhole, and bam, it's all changed, and you're at war with the Klingons,
Yep.
and and losing. And we get to see, once again, I mentioned earlier, we get to see the return of Tasha Yar, because of course in a war vessel they didn't go to that planet. They didn't have a counselor Troy, they didn't have any of this stuff, so that timeline was completely erased, and this new one came up. And it once again shows that by the end of this episode, the sacrifice that people are willing to make to continue the timeline, even if you don't know like what's going to happen. And Guinan, Whoopi Goldberg, is fantastic in this episode, just absolutely fantastic. And she's so good throughout the whole series and the episodes that she's in. But this one specifically, where she goes to Picard and she says, this is all wrong. And he's like, well, I can't do anything based on your "this is all wrong" comment. Like, you got to give me more. And she's like, I don't have more, but you've trusted me for all of this time. You got to trust me now. You got to send that ship back, because it's going to make everything better. Billions of lives are going to be saved. And Picard's his trust with the people that he trusts is always absolute, and he'll always do the right thing. And it's so emotional, because that whoever goes back on that ship is done.
Yeah, they're dead.
Dead. And so and he says it, Picard says it, he's like, I have no choice. 200 lives versus 70 billion or whatever it was. That's a choice that he had to make. And once again, a great Picard episode, because it's bad. Like, it's a bad time for the Federation. And sure, there's lots of cool action in this episode, but it's all about that. What is the greater good? And that's something that we see throughout the, Spock says it, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. And that is something that is all the way through every Star Trek series and movie that you see.
And you always see that. And I think Christopher McDonald is a great guest star in this episode. He's he's such, like, most people know him from Happy Gilmore, and he's hilarious in that, but he's a really great actor. And he is so good in this episode. He only has one episode in Star Trek, but it's I remember him so well. And this is and that ending and you're like, Guinan. She is so, for a kid who knew Whoopi Goldberg from so many things, who started watching Next Generation, it was never, oh well, that's Whoopi Goldberg on a Star Trek show. It was always like, oh, that's Guinan. Like, it was always her. She's always
Guinan. And I mean, and then she comes up to, then when everything reverts and they get everything back, and you hear this little, and it's like, this is Guinan in 10 Forner. And Picard's like, Guinan, what can I help you for? And she's like, I just wanted to make sure everything was okay up there. And he's like, yeah, everything's fine. And then she sits down with Geordi, and it's like that. She goes and she's like, tell me about Tasha Yar, because she never knew Tasha, but she did in this alternate reality, and she maintains some of that. So she goes to Geordi and says, tell me about Tasha Yar. I think that it was the episode. How like you get like a retirement, in hockey you get like a retirement, and everywhere you get standing ovations and stuff like that. I think this was the actual episode where they wanted to thank Tasha Yar for being and gave her a proper ending, a heroic ending, not an ending that doesn't matter. And we know that because she asked Guinan how she died, and it was a meaningless death, and she didn't want that, so she wanted to go and do something. And then of course because you're changing shit, it moves forward.
It definitely is a much stronger ending. Yeah, great episode. So that was your number 3 or your number 2?
That is my number 2. So we are both now on our number 1. Okay. And it's the same.
Okay. So do you want to just say it on 3?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3. Best of both worlds.
Best of both worlds.
We had such a lengthy conversation about this episode. We love this for so many reasons. As a Riker fan, this is Riker's finest hour throughout the entire series and movies. He is so strong in this episode. This is when we finally, we sort of saw the Borg, but that was kind of like a things to come. This is really where the Borg come, and they abduct Picard, and they assimilate him, and there's this whole thing of like, do we risk trying to save Picard and possibly letting the Borg get away, or do we just destroy the Borg? And it's such a great, it's not like, there is action in it, but it's mostly, again, it's a great, like, just discussionary thing. Again, it goes back to that Spock thing of the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. And it's just, and everybody has their own stances on this. And what I love is, again, as a Riker fan, it really comes down to his choice. It's like, I've heard everything. I know everyone's stance, but I gotta do what I gotta do. Mr. Worf, fire.
Fire.
Oh, it's so good.
To be continued, motherfuckers. Yeah, no, it is absolutely, it's Riker's moment, and not just that moment. The actual, he comes up with the plan. Like he comes up, like he wants to save humanity, but he also knows in order to save humanity, they need to save Captain Picard, because if they don't save him, he's just going to, feed them all the information they have. He's a captain in Starfleet. He has all the information that he needs, and they took that from him. Everybody, and assimilate Earth totally.
And it's such a, again, for like, this episode is really, it's about Riker. And of course, to show a little background, this episode came from Patrick Stewart. His contract was up, and he wasn't sure if he wanted to continue doing the show. So there was this way that they were going to be able to, had he chose to not come back, then Jonathan Frakes would become the lead and all this. But the thing I like is, one, I'm glad Patrick Stewart came back. I think we're better for the shows and movies because of it. But I like that because of that, there's a discussion of, well, why is Riker still a commander? Like, he should probably be kicked off this ship and lead his own ship. And there's this discussion of like, well, Riker doesn't want to leave. Like, he likes this, and that, and that new commander who comes on, and it's, and
Shelby.
it's that, and she brings that up, and I like that interesting sort of power struggle where Riker feels like she's trying to push him from this ship that he loves, and it's so great. There's so many, and I mean, of course, the Borg, are one of the all-time Star Trek villains. So good. We'll talk about them in more detail when we get to the movies for sure. But yeah, there's such a great episode.
It's so good, and I mean, like you said it before, it's an absolute Riker story arc, but it's a Data story arc too. Data is
a Beverly Crusher one.
It's a Beverly Crusher. It's a Geordia. It's an everybody's episode. Like, everybody gets to shine in this and get to show a little bit more individuality. And you're absolutely right. Commander Shelby comes on and she rubs Riker the wrong way. She's like, "Yeah, no, I want your job," and because she knows that he's been offered a captaincy at another ship, which we see destroyed, later at Wolf 359. But like, and Shelby's like the young Riker. Like, she's like gung ho. She wants to.
She's Riker from season 1. Exactly,
and I think that's awesome to see the growth of Riker, because now Riker is more of the captain, and the more responsible, and he knows these people now, so he's not just so willy nilly. Let's just go in there and kick ass, and whoever dies dies. He cares for these people and wants to save everybody, and that's the truest sign of a captain. So, Picard going down, Riker stepping up was natural. And so good. So it's
fantastic.
This episode is so good. It was the first real cliffhanger I'd ever seen in my life, of something that I was super, stoked for. And like I said, when that to be continued crap, thing, I'm not even lying. My brother kicked the TV through it and broke it. So he was that upset that we had to wait for an entire summer to see what happened. So number one on my list, number one on your list. I don't think that there was any argument on that one. We both love it.
No,
so
it's so good.
There's so many other episodes that we could have landed on this, but we would have been here for 20 hours.
Yeah, I mean, like, Inner Light was one that I almost put on here. That was the one. It was Tapestry or Inner Light. Inner Light is one of my favorite Star Trek episodes ever. I was kind of hoping you had it on your list, but again,
almost there.
That's the thing. When you have great series like Star Trek and Next Generation, when there's so many great episodes, it's really hard to pick your favorites.
And there was no, as far as I'm concerned, in my opinion, there were no really weak seasons. I mean, you could say season one was they were just fleshing things out,
But
but
even then, like
there's
Encounter at Farpoint is a
Encounter Farpoint is
fantastic
balls, man. It's
episode.
a great episode, and
It's
once again shows shows the vision of Starfleet, shows the vision of Star Trek and Gene Roddenberry's vision. Go out, solve the problems where you're helping the universe, not just other people. Like,
I mean,
such a
he
great episode.
puts humanity on
On trial.
trial and uses the Enterprise as the representation, and it's this fight of like
So
we
good.
have to show the good in it's and that's how the series starts.
So here's a question for all the fans out there. In the comment section below, give us your 1, 2, or top 3 overall Star Trek episodes for original series and for Next Generation, and see if they match up with ours. It'd be
See if
really
they
fun
match
to
up
see.
with ours, and if they don't, why? Again, because we both love Star. You know, we that's why we went with this, because even though I do like later seasons, mostly just Deep Space Nine. Beyond that,
Mhm.
Next Generation, the original series, they're my number 3 TV show of all time. I
Yeah,
couldn't choose that they are my number 3. I love both of them so much.
nice.
Yeah, and I think now I think we'll leave movies for last. So I think
Yeah.
let's get into top 5 characters. So
All
Sandy,
right.
who's your number 5 and 4 characters? And
Okay.
this is
Both
overall.
series.
This
Overall?
is both. Well, this is both series. I mean,
Okay.
for me, it's overall again because I'm mostly a TOS and Next Gen fan. So, guys,
Yep.
this is the original series and Next Generation cast.
That's right. Okay, so whew. All right, I have to make a correction on mine, but my 5 and 4 are. All right, so my number 5 is going to surprise a lot of people, but I said it earlier in this episode that this particular alien group of people are some of my favorites, and some of the episodes that I could not list on my favorite episodes of Next Generation involved this particular race, and that would be the Klingons. And my 5th favorite character out of all of the series, both the series, is Lieutenant Commander Worf.
Great character.
Head of security after Natasha Yar died, and one of the only characters to move over to Deep Space Nine from Next Generation, and and Michael Dorn to be in the movies, and not just his own Next Generation movies, but into actual original cast movies as well. But Worf
he
is
plays his father in
he sure does.
Undiscovered Country.
In Undiscovered. Right. So Worf for me is abandoned at Khitomer because his parents died, rescued by the Federation, raised by Russian parents, Earth parents, raised as a human, but as much Klingon as they could possibly get.
I love his parents in the show.
His parents are so
I love
great.
his parents.
They're so great.
They are the people who you're like, they're the only. It's kind of like how when you talk about Superman, you're like, we're so lucky that Superman wound up with the Kents, because anyone else, Superman would have been a really shitty person. You're like,
Exactly.
These are the only 2 humans in the entire galaxy who could have adopted a Klingon and him turn out like he did.
And a lot of that, and one of the reasons why is I think Worf always equates his honor and the way he feels inside to his Klingon blood and his Klingon heritage, where in fact I think a lot of that honor and a lot of that respect was given to him by his Earth parents, and to make him do. But I mean, his arc is so pivotal to all of the Next Generation, and to Deep Space Nine. It is such a good. What's the episodes what's the 2-part episode with I'm just trying to find it. It was the 2-part Klingon where Gowron was made. Was made Chancellor.
I know what you're talking about.
That where he gets his honor back,
Yeah.
and the Duras fight, and and there's so many good episodes with Worf that he's my number 5 character. I'd hands down.
Great choice. So
Okay.
Such a great character.
All right, so my number 4 character is another Next Generation cast member. A lot of people are going to flip out when I say this, so you tell us what your top 5 characters are, and we can do that. But my number 4 is Captain Jean-Luc Picard. He is my number 4 character.
That's a punt.
All right, it's a punt. All right, we got it. Punt. All right, buddy, let's get your number 5 and number 4.
So my number 5 is, people might be like, really? But yeah, my number 5 is Beverly Crusher.
Nice.
She is my favorite female Star Trek character out of all the series. I love Beverly Crusher. I had a little bit of a thing for her when I was younger, and everyone was like, "Oh, he's Deanna Troy," and I was the one guy. I was like,
"That red hair, buddy." I'm with you on that one.
She's so. There's so many great things about her. I love how she's never like. She never takes shit from like Riker or Picard. Like she's no, boss, we need to do this. Like her relationship with Wesley is so like from season 1. There's a real maternal thing about her, and I love how that you understand why she became a science officer, because she cares about people. But it's also that strength of her to be like, she cares about people, but she's also not willing to see bad stuff happen just because the prime directive is saying so or something. She's like, no, we need to go to that ship and we need to help this people. And you can easily tell why a character like Jean-Luc Picard would fall in love with her, is because she is all these things, and she's such a great character. I didn't like in season 2 when she wasn't really there.
I know, Dr. Pulaski.
Dr. Pulaski was okay, but I was so happy when she came back in season 3, of course. Beverly Crusher is fantastic.
And she's such a great pick. And I mean, one of the best episodes, there's 2 really best episodes that could pop out to her. The one with the Ferengi that died, and nobody knows it, and people are disappearing and going here, and she's like, thinks she's going crazy, and it's an all episode. And then you've got the episode where
Iborg. When she saves this Borg's life, and Picard, after what happened to him in Best of Both Worlds, is like, let's kill it. And she's like, no, it's a being. Like, we need to, like, it's a alien life form. We need to treat it like one. It's,
Or the episode where Picard and her are tethered by their minds, and they can read each other's minds. That's such a great Picard and Beverly episode. It's so good. So yeah, I respect you putting her on your list.
And she's
absolutely
fantastic in all good
She's
things.
so good.
So good in
so
that
good.
too. Yeah.
Oh, so good, because they're married, and
they're divorced. Actually, they were married.
They were married.
Still has the Picard name, and that's one of the best moments is Captain Picard. Yes.
Yes. He's like, yeah, hold on.
Oh man, yeah.
All right, what's your number 4?
My number 4 might be a punt, but I have is the first officer, Mr. Spock.
It is a punt.
Okay, so let's go on to your number 3 then. Your number 3 and 2.
Good. All right. So my number 3 we're going to be able to talk about together. So my number 3 is your number 4. It's Mr. Spock.
Okay.
All right. So listen. Leonard Nimoy is, contrary to what most people believe, Leonard Nimoy is a fantastic actor. To be able to be deadpan throughout, as many episodes as he's been on there, to show as little emotion as possible, and to be as logical as he could be. I don't care what anybody says. Leonard did such a fantastic job of being Spock that nobody else could do it, until somebody else did do it and did it relatively well. Not as well as Leonard Nimoy did, but he's still,
talk about that when we get to
exactly.
That movie.
Yeah, exactly.
For right now, because the thing is, when we get to some of these characters, of course, like, no one else has played Beverly Crusher yet.
That's right.
We're talking about Leonard Nimoy.
Exactly. So, he's you always talk about in the comics that the Holy Trinity of Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. I consider the Holy Trinity Spock, McCoy, and Kirk of the original series and all those movies. Without those three, you've got the hot-headedness of Leonard McCoy. You've got the steely logic of Spock, and then you've got the person in the middle who has to make the decision. And Spock's ability to take things at a logical stance is sometimes some of the smartest writing that you get to hear, and he does it so well because you cannot, as humans, we have emotions. So obviously, in lots of situations, our first thing is to either go gung ho or get out of there. And he brought another aspect to being a character on a show, which was like, but if we do it this way, logically, this can work this way. And it was so smart and intelligent. But then you often saw little breaks, like when the Great Vulcan episode where Spock has to go back to Vulcan and get married, and they fight.
Mock time.
Exactly, and they go back, and then Spock hands himself over to Dr. McCoy. I'm gonna, submit myself for court martial. Blah blah blah. I've killed my captain. And Kirk walks in, and you see that, Jim. And that emotion, that and then him come right back into, oh, I'm so happy that you're alive, Captain. Blah blah blah. And then Bones giving him hell for it. Spock is just a great character over around. I'm so glad that he's on your list as well. What do you think about Mr. Spock?
I love Mr. Spock. He's such a great character because he's so interesting because he's half human, half alien, but he really tries to hide his human side. And that's always the funny thing of, Uhura is usually trying to mess with him about it. Mr. Spock, don't you think I'm a fine, young, attractive girl? It's funny at times, but then you also get great things of, his relationship with Nurse Chapel sort of brings the human out. And, of course, the ultimate episode is when we first see Spock cry. And it is so powerful, and it's... Yeah, and listen, I'll be honest here, and Leonard Nimoy's death was one of the first celebrity deaths that's actually hit me. I remember finding out about it when I was in high school, and I was in class, and I wanted to cry, and then that's silly because I never met Leonard Nimoy, ever. I only knew him through TV screen, but that character, he made such a on the surface cold character, was really one of the most human characters, and the things he does in Wrath of Khan is so powerful, and I love Spock so much.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And listen, just because we don't meet these people, just because we don't know them in real life doesn't mean they don't affect our lives. I mean, they would come into our lives every single week, and they do mean something to us, and not as their character, but as their people. So yeah, you're absolutely right. When Leonard Nimoy passed away, I won't even lie, I did cry, and it was very sad.
If I wasn't in school, I probably would have, because I'll tell you now, cried when I found out Carrie Fisher passed away.
Yeah.
Cried when I found out Alan Thicke passed away, because
Paul Walker for me.
Those were two people who just meant so much to me, and and I did it. Yeah, that's a conversation we have entirely. But let's go on to my number 3, which is a punt from yours, which is Jean-Luc Picard.
Correct.
USS Enterprise. Yeah, Picard's great. We both had this conversation before. There's two types of Picard. There's movie Picard and show Picard. We're both movie Picard. And I love him in the show. He's so great. But I like the Picard that we get in, First Contact and Insurrection. The one who... And the thing is they are the same character. I hate that people try to paint that, they're not. They are. It's just when you get to the movies, Picard has been doing this for so long. Insurrection works because... Which we'll talk about because that movie is on my top 10 list. It's very high, actually. Yeah, I'm sorry. I love that movie. The thing about him is that movie works because he's going against the Prime Directive, and that only works, and it's so interesting because we saw throughout the show how with the Prime Directive he was. That's how he ran it. And so the fact that he's gotten to a point, yeah, but I love Picard because of that. I love the character arc from the show to the movies we get with him. He's so fantastic. He's such a great, Patrick Stewart's such a great actor with this character.
It was so, like, when you grow up with Kirk as the captain, and he's the gung ho. I know they love to say it, over and over. They cowboy diplomacy. You run in there with guns blazing, and then sort the rules out later. Mm-hmm. Having Picard come out as more of a diplomat than a fighter, although he's proven time and time again that he can hold it with his with the best of them. But the simple fact is that he was more of a thinking captain. He wanted to talk himself, out of, particular situations. He didn't like that, to fight. He really did consider the Enterprise not a warship, but a ship of exploration. And that was his true, from when he was a young kid sitting on his roof in France to, looking at the stars.
I mean, going to the Smithsonian and seeing
exactly
and seeing the first starship with
exactly
warp drive. Like, that's all he ever wanted to do was explore space. He didn't join Starfleet so he could go and kill aliens. He wanted to explore space and learn new things. That was the thing about Picard, was he was always a scholarly person. He was always reading. He was always listening to opera. Like, that's just who he was.
And that was... And I think that was by design. I think that Gene wanted everybody to see that there was a different side of the Federation, the exploration side, where the world wasn't so, or the universe wasn't so angry that, but back in Kirk's Enterprise time, they were like just starting to really explore space a lot. So there was still a lot of enemies out there. So it was dangerous.
It was the same thing as exploring the world post World War I. There are still enemies. There are still things that are not the best.
That's right. But the way he was able to bring that grace and that, John Roca is going to love that I use this, that gravitas, but he did, like, he brought it, like, really you did. Automatically respected Captain Picard because not only did he earn it, but he
earned it. Oh, I'm sorry, go.
But he proved it. Like, he proved it every time again.
Through the show and movies, he proved. And the thing I love is, it would have been so easy because Captain Kirk was such a popular character to just do Captain Kirk 2.0 and have a similar character, and they didn't. They went with the opposite spectrum, and it worked so well. And I mean, so many great things are just like, you hear stories about Patrick Stewart talking with Gene Roddenberry before they started shooting, and he was like, when they figured out a cure for baldness in the future, and Gene Roddenberry was just like, well, no, in the future they don't care.
Yeah.
Like, they don't care that he's bald. No one cares. And he's awesome.
He's awesome. So yeah, I know. So Picard was my 4.
So
he was
now we go
3.
To your number 2. Yeah, Picard was my 3, Spock was my number 4, and Spock was your number 3.
Your number 3, yeah. So we're on to my number 2 now. Yeah. My 2 is absolutely, should be no surprise to anybody. My number 2 is Captain James Tiberius Kirk.
That is a pun.
Oh, fuck. So we're gonna talk about your number 2, which is my number 1.
Okay, so which order do you want to do it with then?
It doesn't matter. Let's what?
We'll go. Let's talk about Riker first then.
Let's go seniority. We'll go seniority. We'll talk about Kirk first.
Okay, we'll talk about. So yeah, Kirk is my number 1. Will Riker is my number 2, and it's Sandy's number 1.
Yep.
Let's just talk about both of these characters at the same time because they are very similar and very
different.
Similar. They're both the brawn before brains sometimes, but they certainly have the brains.
Certainly have the brains.
The thing about Kirk that was so great, and William Shatner, the thing that was so great was he did have he was the type of guy that he was the perfect choice to be leading that ship in the time where it's like, we are very diplomatic. We are going to these places not looking for a fight, but goddamn, if a fight's going to come to me, I'm not going to back away from it. Like, he was the perfect, like, I love Picard, but Picard wouldn't have been a good captain for that. Like,
Yeah.
Kirk was a good captain of like, okay, let's go. Let's meet people like Khan and let's talk to him. But then if you try and take over my ship, I'm not going to bow to you. I'm going to
Toast.
stand up and fight to you. And that Kirk is the reason why he's my favorite character is he's the embodiment of that spirit we talked about of the never give up, never surrender thing of Starfleet. Kirk is the embodiment of that because Kirk throughout the entirety of Arena, a mock time, just to name two, he gets the crap kicked out of him, and yet he
Nope.
still stands. But the thing is it always comes to, again, Arena. He can kill the Gorn, but he doesn't. He doesn't. You know, he goes, "You're bloodlust. You won't get it from me." Like, it's so great. He shows compassion because he's a human and he cares about people. Like, that's the reason why Kirk joined Starfleet is because he can. In a way, Picard joined Starfleet because he wanted to explore space. Kirk wanted to explore space to make sure it was safe for people.
That's right.
Picard was really, to use a historical figure, he was really Theodore Roosevelt. You know, he had a big stick policy. He was exploring things to make sure that they were safe for the others, for the people who couldn't stand up to the Khans and the Klingons. That he was there and he could stand up to them to make sure that they weren't in the way when these people did come to explore space because they should.
Exactly. And I mean, that's something to think about when you're talking about Kirk is that not only could he, he can fight with the best of them. Like, I mean, he can fight with the best of them. He, double axe handles for the win, right? I mean, it's fantastic. But it was his loyalty, and his, and his desire to make sure that everybody was protected and that he, that made him special. He was the youngest starship captain in Starfleet history. He got there before everybody did. And, that means something, that also means that he's incredibly smart. So
Yes.
People can say whatever they want about him just being a bruiser and, a lover. He was both of those things, but you don't become starship captain at the earliest age ever and go through Starfleet faster than anybody. Unless you're Spock, or Data.
But Spock was a different spectrum.
Exactly. And so he's that smart guy. And you mentioned the Gorn. Like, if he isn't smart, guess what? He can't create that cannon that saves his life. He can't see sulfur. He can't see this, and he can't see the diamonds and
figure out that
if I put
all this stuff together, I can get a shot off. And
that's right. It's the difference between somebody who is just a security officer and somebody who's strong but also smart, and able to benefit from what's around it, and the fact that and compassionate though too, because he, like you said, he could have killed the Gorn, but he didn't. Like, he could have took those two knuckleheads with the different painted faces and just go, "Hey guys, dunk," and knock their heads together. Can't you guys see that you're the same, just different? And he
could have left Khan. He could have been like, "Oh, hey, these people are just in cryo freeze. Okay,
put them back in cryo freeze and
Let's
just
go.
Put them back in there, fix all their
bye-bye.
shit, send them off to the sun somewhere." Exactly, but he didn't. He did something compassionate. There were repercussions from it, but he took that and he made the right choices. And I think he's a little bit maligned because of the difference between him and Picard. But I think in a lot of ways,
and I get why people. I
similar.
understand why people would like Picard more. I 100% get that. But Kirk's amazing. Now let's talk about the character that we both like more than Picard in their own series. This is Will Riker. This guy has the best arc out of all the characters in Next Generation. He starts off the show as he's a young commander. He's new. Yep. He has his former romance with Deanna Troi. And then he ends the series, and by series I mean including the movies, he ends it as captain of his own ship. And it's such a great journey he goes on. And Jonathan Frakes is so good. You believe the wide-eyed commander in season 1 in the same way that you believe the be thrown into the captain's chair in season 3 in Best of Both Worlds. Like, you just believe it so much, and he's a character that I love watching. He's ever since I was younger. Ever since I first started watching Next Generation, I was always a Will Riker fan. It always perplexed me. People like to make fun of. He likes to stand with his leg up on stuff, and he plays the trombone. It's like I never understood like the Riker hate. Like I never quite got it when I was younger because no one would ever talk about Riker the way I wanted to talk about Riker. And which also I think made him a little bit more special to me because everyone liked Kirk. But like Will Riker was the one where like that he was kind of my guy. Like he was the guy I would be talking about when no one else would.
Well, Kirk like I'm 46 years old, so Kirk was my parents' captain for their Enterprise. Like they came up in the 60s, and that was Kirk, that was their commander. And like my captain, like I grew up with Next Gen, and so Riker was the guy that I was tall, I had dark hair, I could grow a beard. So he was my guy because I familiarized myself with him, as a person. I will say this about Riker. I love him a lot, but if you want to get right into the head of Commander, or at this point, Lieutenant Riker, there's a fantastic book out there. It's one of my favorite books. I wish I had it on hardcover, but I don't. It's called Imzadi. It's about the relationship and how the relationship started with Deanna Troi when Riker was posted a station on Beta Z, and it's a deep story. It deals with future stuff and past stuff.
Well, I mean,
but you get to see that whole relationship.
They're in my top 5 TV couples. Deanna Troi and Will Riker, they're fantastic.
And you get to find out what that Imzadi term means and why it's used. And it's such a great book because you get to see, and he says it like right at the beginning of the book. He's like, I'm going to beat Kirk's record. He was so driven. He was so focused on that goal. And then you see that goal slightly change as the book progresses. And then you see it completely progress when he's on Next Gen, because he was still gung-ho and he still wanted his own captaincy and he wanted to get there as quickly as possible. But once he fell for the rest, like once he was with the crew and they became so important to him, and he had a mentor, it wasn't about speed. Exactly.
He realized he started as, I'm going to become a captain faster than Kirk, and then realizing my place is to be commander of this ship, because when Picard can't be here, I am the best choice to be in charge of this ship. Like, and I love that he realizes that's his, until again we get to Nemesis, and we could say things about that movie on its own, but that's the one phase. Like by the end of that movie, he realizes my time as commander of this ship is done. It's time for me to move on and become captain of my own ship. Exactly. By the way, you guys for never making a whole show about that.
I know.
I would have loved that show.
Awesome.
My God, I would have watched that show.
I would have taken that over a Discovery series any day, hands down, 25 times a day. It's so good. But
coming soon to CBS All Access.
That's right.
Will Riker Star Trek series starring Matt Kearns with Sandy Robinson as an older Picard.
Well, no, whatever. No, man. You can put me. I'll be Worf, man. I'll get into Klingon makeup. I'll get up in that Klingon makeup. No time, man.
Let's do this. Let's make. You know what we can do actually? And I'm sorry, I don't care if it's our show. We can do it radio drama series. So nice. We can do it like the old Star Wars radio dramas. We can just do it where we can just have like a picture and we can just have the logo, and it could just be, we could write full episodes and just act it. I would love to do that. Oh my God.
That's a great idea, dude.
And we get everyone else at Take 3 involved. Let's do this. Let's make this an actual thing. Cody is definitely a Ferengi. Like, he's definitely like that asshole alien. Malcolm is Data. That's already decided.
Yeah. I think Brooklyn could probably be McCoy. He's got that sarcasm a little bit there, but he's got the smarts that he can pull off the technical speak.
Definitely Beverly Crusher.
Beverly Crusher, yeah. There we go.
This is a thing that me and Sandy are going to make happen. Coming soon to Take 3 is going to be Star Trek the radio drama. And it's going to be crossing over timelines so we can have McCoy and Riker in the same show. It's going to be amazing. This is going to be so much fun.
Well, to not be the stickler of the group here, but we see Leonard McCoy as a very old man
he's
in
an admiral in the first episode of Encounter at Farpoint, which is one of the most heartwarming moments. It's just at the end of that episode, it's just like, you talk like a Vulcan, but you don't have pointed ears.
What? Is your blood green? Come on, kid. And he has that total Southern accent drawn in there. Yeah, DeForest Kelly. I love DeForest Kelly.
So I honestly, of all the characters, I thought for that scene in Encounter at Farpoint, I thought he was the best character to choose. I honestly.
And we know later on with with Relics, the great 2-part episode with
Spock.
with Jimmy Doohan with Scotty. When he comes back, he gets caught in the transporter. He's great too.
He's someone who I like older Scotty from the movies, and that he's just so warm and lovable. Like he is.
He's your grandpa.
He's your grandpa.
He's your grandpa. It's awesome. So all right, so those are our that's our list, our top 5 Star Trek characters from the original series and the Next Generation series. If we went into Deep Space Nine and Voyager, our lists would be way too long. But I think
Speaking now of a list that's way too long, we're gonna get into top 10 Star Trek movies.
Mr. Worf, fire.